I was not going to claim my body until it was perfect. I wasn't even going to claim it. And intuitive eating really helped me with that. So when I discovered it, and I could be more comfortable, one, in any size, but two, knowing that I had freedom to eat and I didn't have to worry about every morsel that went into my mouth, I thought I have to share this with people. I have to share this with women who've been on the same cycles for literally, we have been dieting on and off between 20 and 30 years. I'm your host, Kim Hines, and welcome to the Emotional Eats podcast. I'm on a mission to show you that what you consume, not just the food, affects your entire life. Midlife is different. Let's dig into the real reasons why you eat when you're not hungry and why you're not feeling well. My guests and I are going to give you doable solutions and help you let go of perfectionism, food rules, and stress to make changes that will last a lifetime. If you're ready to ditch old school diet culture and nourish your entire life, this is the show for you. Hi, everyone. My name is Kim Hines, and I'm a certified nutritionist, intuitive eating and midlife coach. Welcome to the Emotional Eats podcast. In this episode, which is the trailer, actor Janet Greer, and also my really good friend, interviews me so I can share with you what this podcast is going to be about. Midlife is different, my friends. It doesn't have to be horrible, and it's actually a great new chapter. Maybe you're tired of failing at diets or trying to do the things that worked for you in your 20s and 30s, or maybe you have new health challenges as a midlifer. You will learn so much from my guests and me. I also share my personal story with my body image, food obsession, disordered eating, and how I used to use food as comfort and how I overcame that. I also share about ditching diet culture because it just doesn't work. Jen and I talk about what intuitive eating means in this episode, why I love it for me and my clients, and why I want to share it with you, my listeners. We also have a conversation around all of the other aspects in our lives that contribute to the health journey and making it a little more challenging. So I will have guests on in the future to talk about stress, mental health, menopause, relationships, sleep, alcohol, just to name a few. My expert guests and I want you to feel amazing in your body, energetic, and ready to take on life. And I want you to feel comfortable in your own skin, mentally and physically. Don't forget to follow Janet on Instagram at Janet Greer Actor. Greer is spelled Greer, and follow me at Kim Hines Health. See you in episode 1. Hi, Janet.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for being with me today and helping me introduce my new podcast, the Emotional Eats podcast.
It's very exciting, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. I've always loved what you do and how you inspire others. And now that you're working with people that are women, especially that are over 40, I was wondering if you wanted to talk about what inspired you to create this podcast specifically for those women.
Midlife is different, and there's a lot more going on with us than we've lived a lot of life also. And I think women are so wise and they are so good to other people, caretaking, taking care of kids, parents, taking care of everyone around them. And now it's time for them to be able to take care of themselves. And I was very inspired by my clients. And I wanted to share even more about the things that women can do to feel better, to feel more comfortable in their body, to feel mentally better, to reduce the stress. There's so much going on in our lives, and we still have so much more life to give. But I was also inspired because going through the changes myself, we go through so much with our minds and our bodies. I think in our 40s and 50s, it's a new chapter, but sometimes it's a very challenging chapter. And we feel very alone. And I didn't want women to feel alone. So I thought I would start a podcast with all the wonderful people that I've met. I have some really cool guests that have a lot of great information. And I also have a lot to say, to share. And so that people can pick and choose what works in their life And that's what's inspiring me.
Well, I know you're very inspiring. You've always inspired me a lot in so many ways. So you're perfect for this. I can't wait. And I'm just wondering what really made you interested in what you've always been referring to as intuitive eating. Sort of, from what I understand, you're breaking free from the regular diet cycle or diet culture, and you call it intuitive eating. What made you get interested in that?
Yes, thank you. That's one of the biggest questions and what I really focus on now. It starts pretty far back. I have some pretty pivotal points in my life where I look back now and I realize that some disordered eating happened. And when I was very young and my mom went back to work and she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just going back to work. I was old enough to stay home with my little brother. When she wasn't there, I would dig into the cupboards and I would find anything that had to do with sugar. It could be the chocolate chips that we were supposed to save for baking. It could be the country time lemonade. I would eat it like a pixie stick. I would be comforting myself early on, probably around age 10, because back in those days, we were old enough to stay home with our little ones. And then I had another big moment when I went away to college, and for the first time my body changed and I gained weight. It was so unfamiliar to me, and I really didn't understand all the reasons why I gained all this weight. But what I did find out is how people reacted to me, how people treated me, how people in my own family talked about what was going on with my body and noticing it, and even how this is really a funny thing that I remember so well, but this is how our brains work and how women create labels for themselves. But I actually had a boyfriend in college that when we broke up told friends, my old girlfriend before Kim had a better body. And so, yes, that is what you start to hear these labels from people around you. And our brain is really good about hanging on, by the way. So I carried that and got myself in the 80s really entrenched in that diet culture where we were just beginning to hear about, eating Special K, drinking Slim Fast, Weight Watchers,
I
and
remember all of it. I
yes,
remember.
all of it. And I was going to aerobics classes 2 or 3 times a day to think that I could possibly burn everything off. And the problem is, regardless of whatever weight I was in, I never loved my body and I never loved myself. So it didn't matter if I gained weight or if I lost weight. I never felt like I was worthy or deserving. And when important people in your life, sometimes there are comments made, it stays with you. But what happened is I still continued to be a part of this. And my biggest issue was really when I got divorced, I was a marathon runner. So I had a very strong binge restrict cycle. I would binge, but of course, no one would notice because I was running many, many miles a week for marathon training. And then I would restrict, and I would be very unhappy going back and forth between the two. And there was always, I can't even think of a time for many, many years that I didn't obsess about food. So when I was taught about intuitive eating and I started listening to my body and I started really tuning in, and I learned that intuitive eating is not just food, it's how we reduce stress. It's our relationships, it's our spirituality, it's our movement, it's our connections with people. It is sleep, it's everything. When I could start to get in tune with more parts of my body and connect with my body, instead of looking at it, I was not going to claim my body until it was perfect. I wasn't even going to claim it. And intuitive eating really helped me with that. So when I discovered it, and I could be more comfortable, one, in any size, but two, knowing that I had freedom to eat and I didn't have to worry about every morsel that went into my mouth. I thought I have to share this with people. I have to share this with women who've been on the same cycles for literally, we have been dieting on and off between 20 and 30 years, most of us.
Absolutely. I know I always read about if you added up how many times you gained and lost weight, it's frightening to see how many times, even if it's 5 pounds up and down or 10 pounds, how many times we've gained and lost the same amount of weight. But it sounds like you don't focus just on weight. You don't focus just on the scale. You don't focus just on what we're eating, putting in our mouths, or calories. It's more of a holistic approach and our lifestyle, and also just the part about how we feel about ourselves. And you talked about things people have said throughout your life, and certainly I have a ton too. And I really remember the negative comments so much more than the positive ones, right? And
Yes.
they stick in there. They stick in there, and they become true when it's just a comment that somebody said. We live it as our truth, right?
Yes. And that is a limiting belief. Our limiting beliefs, that is the definition of them. It's something that we believe to be true. And we can change those limiting beliefs. And the most important part is working on that, because without the practice, and that's something that will come up a lot in the podcast, positive self-talk, rewiring the brain, working to change those limiting beliefs, because it's a voice in your head, but it's not your own voice. It's somebody else's. And we just have to recognize that and find the truth. And in the podcast, we want to find a lot of the truths that you can work with in order for you to make changes. And they don't have to be drastic changes. The scale is a wonderful, tangible tool, but it's also a number. And the number that we look at, we attach ourselves to a number of calories in a day, and the macros, the scale. We are not robots. We're emotional beings. We're human beings. And you know, as a woman, how you feel in your clothes. You don't need to get on the scale. You know how you feel if you have energy. You don't need to get on the scale. You know when your skin looks great. These are things that we intuitively need to get back in touch with.
There's that word intuitive again. It's a good one. And I think that you're right about that. And I'm afraid of the scale, but the truth is, I know how I feel. Like you said, how you're fitting your clothes, the energy that you have, skin. It's such a great point. But I know that the intuitive eating and the intuitive approach is the way you do approach it. But what are the challenges that you find with the women you work with? The biggest challenges, the hardest obstacles to overcome when women are trying to manage, whether it's weight or just their overall health and wellness?
That's a great question. When women come to me, there are so many things that they've already learned. And I love the idea of helping them unlearn some of the things that have not worked in the past. But it's like hitting your head against the wall sometimes, because we don't know any other way, when we have seen over and over again, lose 30 pounds in a month, get your summer ready body, all these different tactics. We are just inundated, and we are also marketed to feel less than. And so unlearning that. And when we talk, I start with those limiting beliefs that we just talked about. That is one of the first things we have to overcome. Is you can, and you are able to make changes if you want to. They don't have to be the way everybody else does it. So if somebody else is going and doing a 45-minute workout, you can start with 10 minutes. If somebody else is going and doing a 5-mile run, you can walk for 20 minutes. It's relative to you. It's bio-individual to you. But I'm also breaking down the barriers to all the things that we've learned. When I talk to someone, and a lot of listeners are going to relate to this, we will say a product, or we'll talk about a food, and they'll say, oh, that's 70 calories, or it's only 100 calories. We're already using terms which are not necessarily super accurate, by the way, but they also are irrelevant to our bodies and how we feel. And it's hard to break those chains. It's hard to break the chains of what food is. And I'm going to put this in air quotes. So listeners, air quotes, good food and bad food. Because when we think of food, this is literally the biggest battle. when we think of having a good day, when I was good today, a lot of my women will say that I was good today. And what they meant is they ate clean, healthy food. Well, ladies, you are good all the time. You are not good or bad based on the food that you eat. And that is a label that we put on it. And when we say bad food, it gives us a terrible, shameful, guilty feeling when we eat it instead of using it as a treat and enjoying it and slowing down. And that's the other barrier, is just being mindful. Busy, busy women don't take the time to sit down and really enjoy their food. And when they're so stressed out, we get into the pantry because it's food makes us feel good. It is the one thing that we can grab so quickly and it makes us feel good right away. So learning what that does to us, not necessarily stopping it, not getting forbidden foods out of the house, but learning so that you can be really aware of your habits. Those are the things that we have to work with.
I love the way you talk about not labeling everything as good and bad. And it's almost as if you failed for the day because you ate something that you label, again, it's labeled as bad. And then it's like you get a big X for the day, like you failed the day instead of concentrating or remembering something good you did that day. You end up saying, oh, I'll start over tomorrow, right? Instead of taking something good from the day. Can all be quote unquote bad, but it sounds like you don't want to even label things bad or good,
No,
right?
and you said the exact reason why, because it demotivates us. I'm not a big fan of the word motivation anyway, but when you have something go on that you've labeled as bad, we want a perfect day. We want a perfect day, but no day is perfect. We don't always say exactly the right thing. We don't always do exactly the right thing. We're not always on time. We're not always getting our to-do list done. So why do we put the pressure of food on ourselves and exercise like that? So I love that you said that. We don't have to start over on a Monday, the first of a month, or January 1st. We
Right.
literally can start with the next meal. But the point I always want my clients and listeners to understand is if you're going to eat something, I'm going to use chocolate because that's my favorite.
Me
we talk
too.
about
Me
we talk
too.
about sweets all the time, but if you're going to eat it, this is what I'd love for you to do: to really slow down, taste it, smell it, know what that texture's like. Because if you're going to eat it, you might as well enjoy it. And the more you enjoy it, the more that you will slow down and probably eat less. And we'll have a lot of tips with all the guests on how to deal with the cravings and whether or not you should even try to be curbing them.
Oh, that's interesting. You're not about restricting. You're more about eating it, but actually enjoying it, not just scarfing it down. I know there's sometimes that I can't recall what I eat in a day, even in that same day, because I'm doing other things at the same time. And then I also sometimes equate it, even eating sweets or eating something like that, with watching my favorite show and doing it at the same time, because then it's like a double pleasure. I don't know how you feel about that. That's a habit I have, but it's sort of combining two things. And when you do that, you're not, as you say, as mindful about the eating. I imagine you hear this a lot.
I do. And we'll also be talking about that because there's more than just TV is distraction. Our world is one big distraction right
Mm.
now. We have phones, we have social media. Yes, watching TV at night is such a great time to come down. We are driving and eating. We are eating while we're trying to take care of other people. It's constant. I eat while I
Yeah.
work sometimes and I don't remember my food. So those are definitely part of this intuitive eating process. And we are not perfect. That's going to happen. And enjoying something while you're watching a show is fun. That's when we do have to be aware of, hey, let's bring it in and let's try to taste it while we're watching. And then, yes, you'll have that double pleasure. And that's your eating, that's your fun time. And we even have a really great guest coming up in one of the first few episodes talking about blood sugar and how that gets affected by how we eat too.
That's wonderful. I love your approach to all of this. It doesn't feel like I'm in trouble. It feels like I'm accepted, and that I can maybe just make more mindful choices, talk about them, and just kind of learn how to make better decisions for me. But also it sounds like it's always a learning process and a growing process. It's not just yes or no. You're always part of this journey that you call the wellness journey.
I love that. And I'm glad you mentioned the word journey, because having a healthy body and healthy mind is a work in progress all the time. We really don't want a destination, because what happens if you get to that destination? So, for example, I had mentioned earlier that it didn't matter what size I was. It didn't matter if I was the fittest I've ever been. It didn't mean I loved myself more.
Yeah.
So, loving yourself every day, self compassion, along with everything else that we're doing, it's a journey. When you can enjoy the present moment and right now, that's the healthiest you can be. That's the best you can do. This is today, not worrying about the 10-pound mark. It's great if you get there and that's something you wanted, but what happens after that? It's like a diet, a 30-day plan. There's always a day 31. A 90-day plan, there's always day 91. So if we're just always just doing the best we can, loving ourselves through it, then we don't have to worry about that outcome.
It sounds like it's also sort of changing your mindset, the way you look at things going forward. There's not a beginning and an end. It's just, this is where we are today. You're very about in the moment and what we're doing now, and obviously kind of forgiving ourselves and being kinder to ourselves, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And we have some great guests coming on in the podcast that are going to highlight their expertise in how they help people do the same thing. But maybe it's in dealing with alcohol, maybe it's in dealing with fitness. All these different people have a different way of doing it, but we all have very similar philosophies.
You have such a calming presence and a way of inspiring people. There never feels like there's any judgment. And I think your listeners will definitely hear that as well. Your guests upcoming sound really exciting too. So, your ultimate goal is to empower women and to inspire them, women, especially over 40, especially going through sort of some of the changes that women go through at this phase in their life. Would you
Yes,
say?
I want women to, yes, absolutely. And I want women to feel so empowered and be their own advocates and not feel like life is happening to them. There are certain changes that we're going to go through. And anyone who listens to the podcast, I definitely am veering towards women over 40, but there are so many topics in here that so many people can benefit from. And being empowered in your health and taking steps. And they don't have to be drastic steps. It could be just even simple enough as going and getting blood tests done so you know where you stand. Teaching people to be an advocate, to listen to themselves, to set boundaries. There are so many different areas that we're going to look at. I'm going to have some mental health counselors on also who will talk about some of these other areas of changing our mindset from that negative to positive and being able to feel much more confident in the choices that we're making, whether they're going in the right direction or not. Just feeling confidence to be an experiment and try some things to feel better. Because again, in midlife, the menopausal stages are very confusing. A lot of people don't even know they're going through them. They feel like they're going crazy with all of the symptoms, but just knowing where to even start there to get tested and get started on just the journey of what are my options? We need to know what our options are. So I want women to also feel more confident in being authentically themselves and more confident in their body at any size. I honor women who want to lose weight, but I also want women to feel they are in a positive transition. And while they're in a positive transition, they're amazing. They're working on it. They're doing great. And when we make those changes, just the little things, it's amazing what our mind does. Our mind counts it as a win. Our mind does feel successful, and then our whole body starts to feel successful. And we even make better changes because when we see that and feel it, we are more relaxed. When we can reduce that stress and we can know that we can trust ourselves, then our body can actually start doing the things that it needs to do intuitively. I keep going back to that word because we're not forcing it. This is not a time in our lives that we want to be pushing really hard. We can do hard things. We can do hard things, but we are not pushing so hard that we are not listening and letting the body relax into getting healthy.
It sounds like that's your overall philosophy, what you just stated. It's sort of every aspect of your philosophy, with the word intuitive being one of the big themes.
Yes.
Anything else about your philosophy? Because I think you just described it so well. Is there anything else that you would like to maybe talk about or present as a philosophy for your
Yeah,
podcast?
this is a great way for us to wrap up too, because at the end of every podcast, I'm going to be asking my guests to give 3 tips. I love the idea of us nourishing our entire lives. And like I mentioned, nourishing our entire lives is not just about food. Food is amazing and we do need to look at it, movement and exercise, but it's also our mental health, stress relief, spirituality, connections, all the things that we have in our life that we can nourish. So I'll be asking at the end of every podcast to get 3 tips. So listeners, you'll be getting something tangible from our guests at the end of the podcast. And I will end now with what I will be saying at the end of every podcast, because I truly believe it. Nourish your entire life and give yourself grace today. I really appreciate you being here. If you resonated with this podcast, it would mean a lot to me if you'd be willing to follow or subscribe to the Emotional Eats podcast. Then you'll never miss an episode. Just go to the Emotional Eats show page on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and tap the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner and click on it. While you're there, if you'd be willing to give me a 5-star rating and review, I would be so grateful. If you'd like to take a screenshot and share it on Instagram, just tag me at Kim Hines Health. I would love to hear your thoughts and let me know how I can support you. You can always DM me on Instagram, again, at Kim Hines Health. And just remember to nourish your life and give yourself grace today.